So every chapel tour always starts off with a visit to the Port Aransas Historical Museum, where we talk about the life of Aline Carter and all the wonderful contributions she made while she was here. Also, we listened to a short video that talks about a little bit of the history of the painting of the fresco in the chapel, and we get a few words from Aline Carter's last living son, Frank Carter. So let's step inside. While we're waiting for everyone to arrive, people have a chance to look at the many exhibits at the museum, or they can look through over 100 photos about the chapel and on the chapel, and also the pictures that are drawn in the chapel. So those are available in our archive, which we hold over 37,000 images of historic events, historic places, and like the chapel. And this is where we'll be sitting down to be looking at the short film. I think it's about less than 10 minutes about the chapel.
Part of this job was getting off the paint. And at that time, man, the only door that opened was this main door, and it was so dusty in here that you couldn't even see 2 feet. And I wore a respirator and stuff. We hammered and sanded and blasted the paint that was on here. And we got it down like I wanted it, and we put high glue on it. It's a natural animal high glue, and then we made quite a few batches of homemade gesso, which is whiting and marble dust and titanium white. You heat it. It was during the winter we started. It was Christmas time, and so I'd have to run down there and heat the pot, bring it back, heat the pot, bring it back. And finally, we got it all covered. You know, the whole ceiling, I started in stars. I think there's a few stars left here. You see them? And the stars were the bands that I left after I introduced these panels. So I began to think the whole thing was stars. And then eventually, these sections were imposed upon the stars. And so the ceiling was one of the first things that I actually had to begin, because as stuff falls, it gets on the walls. So I began initially to do the ceiling, and as I say, it was just blue and white and kind of purple. You can see that band is left there. But it used to be stars everywhere. Because I had used this sculpture.
Well, the most frequently question that I usually get is, when was the chapel built? It was built in the late 30s, about 38, 37, someplace along in there. And it was built by my mother, Aline Carter, who was a very religious and dedicated person. And one of the first things that she did when we bought the property was to put this little chapel up here, because there was no other church on the island at that time, and she built it for the children of Port Aransas. This was built by a woman by the name of Harris, who was the custodian of the San Antonio Missions. And she spent a lot of time in the hill country. All of these would come down on weekends, and all of these flagstone steps and floor were got from the hill country. Our next step was to get the children of the island interested in the chapel, to entice the children to come to services, she started this ice cream and cake affair that got to be pretty funny as it went on. And we used to tell her that those kids don't care anything about their service, all they want is the ice cream and cake. Well, this went on until probably World War II.
So here we are at the corner of 11th and B. This is where you would park if you're visiting the chapel, not next to their rental unit here. And in the distance we see Frank Carter's old house that they're restoring to the way it was back in 1937. The path to the chapel is between these two rental cottages. And it gets a little steep. It's definitely not wheelchair accessible. There's the chapel up there. There are a couple of steep steps walking up to the chapel. About halfway we've got a big step due to some washout from Hurricane Harvey that still needs to be repaired. And we're about to go inside. Door's already open. And you can see the inside of the chapel. We have the white marble altar that was designed by Aline Carter. Of course, Ethel Harris did the construction. Also, Ethel Harris did the production of the tiles that were designed by by Aline Carter. And the frescoes start off, you can see if I can zoom out here. In the Old Testament, got Adam and Eve here, tree of knowledge and tree of life. Also the formation of the earth below. Here we have Abraham about to sacrifice his son. We see an angel grabbing his arm and stopping him. Above, we have Daniel's dream about being in a lion's den. You can see the images, the lioness, her cubs, and male lions. Although some people think this is Elvis, it is definitely Daniel. We have a very large panel. To the right of that, we get into the New Testament of Mary, the Immaculate Conception. Below that, we have the Jewish temple. And we have one of John Cobb's concept pieces. This is Job distilling the Spirit of God. And all these radiant lines we see coming from the ceiling have to do with a sculpture that John had put in the beginning that was removed by the Carter family. Over here we have the very recognizable Pentecost. Below, we have Jesus telling the disciples where to throw the nets. You see that there is some blue shading underneath. God said it's that passage where he was walking on water. And we have another very recognizable piece. This is St. Peter when he fell asleep on the rooftop and was dreaming about eating unclean meat, as God was trying to push him towards including the Gentiles in Christianity. And you may have seen a picture of this earlier. This is City of God. And you see there's a wedding scene in here, and you're just going to have to come visit the chapel to hear the story on why that is, the inset has been painted something different. A very interesting story associated with that. And then on the back, we have a very chaotic and somewhat scary images of the apocalypse with Jesus in the second coming in the center, a lot of symbolism, and of course the winged horsemen of the apocalypse flying about. Very interesting piece. The chapel has these pews that were added. We think sometime in the 90s. They're not the original seating. The original seating was just folding chairs. And also there are pieces, really beautiful stained glass pieces that have been removed as they're changing the windows out. We had some issues with some rotting in the framing, and they're being replaced with impact resistant glass. And once that installation is complete, there'll be a stained glass piece there, up at the top, also on this side, and above the altar. And again, you'll have to come back and see those because those are really beautiful pieces. To the right of the altar is a passage from the Bible, a verse from John that became very near and dear to the heart of John Cobb as he painted the fresco. And that's about it. We're going to head out. On our way out, we'll notice that there's another really wonderful picture of Aline Carter on her wedding, and also the Carter Mansion, which is available to be visited as a museum in San Antonio. Another great picture of Aline Carter.